Live video stream at 560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So President Trump last week had his Mark Anthony moment, and I'm not talking about the pop singer.
Yeah, I was going to say
Need to know.
J-Lo's ex-husband.
No, not talking
with
about
the
need to know.
twins. I
No.
hope they're doing well with the split.
No.
Their new
Tell
backup
me,
daddy.
Tell me,
A-Rod.
baby girl, because I need to know. Not that Mark Anthony. The one who uttered the phrase in the great soliloquy in Julius Caesar, cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war.
Well, they're kind of the same, just a little different.
President Trump cried havoc and let slip the dogs of war in the form of Attorney General Barr and his staff, like the Connecticut U.S. Attorney tapped to look at the 2016 election, at the conduct in that election of intel agencies. And that has drawn curious reaction. Well, not that curious. A curious reaction in terms of the uncuriousness of Democrats with respect to, hey, why not have an investigation? Let's see where it goes. Let the investigation play out, just as was said about the Mueller investigation and just as was agreed to with respect to the Mueller investigation by Lindsey Graham and many others. Lindsey Graham on with Chris Wallace on Sunday, addressing the uncurious Democrats.
I declassified everything they want. I put it under the auspices of the Attorney General. He's going to be in charge of it.
Senator, any problem with that?
No, not at all from my point of view. I was one of the Republicans insisting that Mueller be allowed to do his job. I never thought it was a witch hunt. The Mueller report is in. No collusion. Mueller didn't do anything on obstruction. Now I'm insisting that we get to the bottom of this. I want all the documents around the Pfizer warrant application released. I want to find out exactly how the counterintelligence operation began. I think transparency is good for the American people. Not one Democrat seems to care. I was the hero when I said, let's support Mueller. I wish some Democrat would come forward to find out if the Pfizer court was defrauded by the FBI and the Department of Justice. So I support Attorney General Barr to make this as transparent as possible.
And what does Graham say to the likes of John Brennan, who said of this move by the president, I see it as a very, very serious and outrageous move on the part of Mr. Trump, Graham said.
The people who are worried about this are worried about being exposed for taking the law in their own hands. It doesn't surprise me that the people we're looking at, they don't want transparency. We're not compromising national security here. We're trying to create a system to make sure this never happens again by shedding light on what happened with the Pfizer warrant process, the counterintelligence investigation. Did they have a lawful reason to surveil President Trump's campaign? Did they lie to the Pfizer court? Every American should want to find that out.
For more on these on-again, off-again, law and order Democrats, we're pleased to be joined by Salena Zito, Washington Examiner reporter, New York Post columnist, CNN contributor, and her book, The Great Revolt Inside the Populist Coalition, Reshaping American Politics. And after the EU elections, it's not just American politics. Salena Zito, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
What about Lindsey Graham's point is why are Democrats so uncurious about a look-see at 2016? Why so upset that Attorney General Barr would direct this U.S. attorney from Connecticut to just do a review of intel agency actions and decision-making the same way that you have the Inspector General for DOJ doing a review of FBI?
Well, I mean, Lindsey Graham has been consistent, much to the chagrin of those who want him to do what they want on their side on this issue, in that he believes that Mueller should finish the process, and he also believes that there is a need to investigate potential bureaucratic, systemic corruption within the intelligence agencies. I'm not saying there is corruption. I'm saying he wants to make sure there isn't. And he wants it to be a very transparent process. And I think that under that sort of ideal, that it's probably something that everyone in the country should want, because you don't want that much power in your intelligence bureaus in the country if that is what is occurring. That can be incredibly dangerous. Again, if that is occurring.
Now, on Thursday, President Trump gave Attorney General William Barr the authority to declassify documents from multiple agencies regarding the surveillance of the Trump campaign in 2016. What do you think that's going to show?
Well, I mean, that's the great mystery, right? None of us know that. But I do think hints of people being sort of afraid of what it might show is shown by the amount of people, mostly Democrats, that have called for Barr to to resign, and have called for Barr, as partisan. And so when people make those claims and they try to discredit someone, it's usually because they have something to hide. So while none of us know what it's going to uncover, it might be nothing. We just don't know. It's going to be a total mystery. But I think once we do find out, I think we will all have clarity as to what the state of intelligence bureaucracy is in our country.
Yeah, I mean, let the investigation play out. What's the harm? John Brennan, interestingly, too, this New York Times piece over the weekend, Trump targeting of intel agencies gains a harder edge. John Brennan appears to have burned a source with respect to this report, talking about the way Obama was briefed during his tenure at CIA and obviously Obama's tenure in the White House. The New York Times reporting that Brennan would bring reports from the source that was looking at Russia directly to the White House, keeping them out of the president's daily intelligence briefing because he was afraid it would be too widely disseminated. Instead, he would place the information in an envelope for Mr. Obama and a tiny circle of aides to read. John Cipher, former CIA official who led Russia operations for the agency, expressed concern that giving the president names of sources or agency officials who oversaw those informants could put those secrets at risk because they would invariably be more widely disseminated. So it looks like Brennan is sort of trying to put bodies between him and the decision-making and the activities that were going on at CIA during his tenure there and during the 2016 cycle.
I mean, does it shock anybody?
No, but it's worth noting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, right. I mean, yeah, it's important to note, and it's important to point that out because you won't see that kind of sort of logical conclusion within the major press because, Brennan is sort of part of the protective class. And so I think it's really important to document his behavior and what he's trying to do. In particular, if something is revealed that shows a coordinated attempt to discredit or whatever the outcome ends up being of the Trump campaign.
Well, I mean, look, CNN is still reeling from losing Michael Avenatti. I'd hate for them to lose John Brennan as a contributor.
No, he's at MSNBC.
Oh, yeah, I can't keep track. Is there a difference? Okay. Jim Clapper then maybe, or Jim Comey, or some of their other star-studded lineup. So with respect to the president's approach, does the combination of the Democrats' penchant for investigations right to November 2020, plus now this concurrent look by Attorney General Barr, at least directed by AG Barr, this ensures that these related issues about what happened in 2016 on both sides will be part and parcel of the 2020 campaign? No, I mean, you've got debates among the Democrat socialists starting in a month.
Well, that's really fascinating. The debate starts already, even though it's not early. It still seems early. Well, then it seems that we are litigating 2020 since November 9th, 2016. I'm really interested to see during these debates what becomes the most impassioned, what rises to the top in terms of what is their biggest concerns. And that will give us great hints as to what this 2020 is going to be fought on. I personally think, based on the reporting outside of D.C., is that this is going to be very much like 2012 in that it's going to be on culture. And if it is on culture, I believe that the conservative, populist coalition shows up not only as much as it did in 2016, but also brings out more.
And I think the issue, too, of the climate change is going to be right up there, if not first, but second behind culture.
Yeah,
part of
well,
culture.
and also that's sort of part of culture, right? Because, I did a piece 2 weeks ago for the for the New York Post, in which I went to Philadelphia and talked to African American leaders in Philadelphia because they're an important voting bloc, not only for a Pennsylvania primary if it's competitive, but also in a general election. And cultural issues such as pro-life, which African Americans tend to be much more pro-life than their other Democratic peers, but also climate change. Joanne Hall, who has been a leader in the African American movement within the Democratic Party since the 80s, said, look, people here, in particular African Americans, don't have the luxury of putting climate change ahead of putting food on the table. They don't have the luxury of being that progressive. If they have to choose between food on the table and a good job in the energy sector or climate change, they're going to go with the job.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, all this stuff, Alicia Finley writes about it in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend. The Mendelez making all of its wrappers recyclable by 25, and Goldman Sachs banishing paper cups, and Starbucks eliminating plastic straws. If the left thinks that's how they're going to rebuild the blue wall, then they've got another thing coming.
Right. You don't win on those issues because they don't impact pocketbooks. They don't impact people's lives. They don't make lives better. And so that's where you get another form of populism where voters just don't show up as a form of protest because you put forth a candidate that is very distant from their values.
Well, right. And isn't that what we saw happen in part the recently concluded EU parliamentary elections where you had Macron got his head handed to him in France, and that this was preceded by a surprise result in Australia, which was largely about climate change policies.
That's exactly right. Look, here's the challenge for the Democrats. The people within the Democratic Party that have the loudest voice are white intellectuals. And their opinion is echoed by the press, which also tends to share white intellectual values because they all live in the same super zip code. What happens is they're very distant and disconnected from what regular middle-class suburban Democrats care about across the country. That's their challenge.
She is Salena Zito, Washington Examiner reporter, New York Post columnist, CNN contributor of the book. You got to pick up the book because it's as relevant in 2020 as it was in explaining 2016. The Great Revolt Inside the Populist Coalition Reshaping American Politics. Salena, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 5.